gonna tell you something that they don't tell you about the prison system. That is ran by a bunch of mental patients and criminals. True story. Most of the COs that come in and work there were Army vets, ex-Army vets, and whatnot, suffering from PTSD. Some of them are addicted to drugs. You know what I mean? A lot of them, like I dealt with them. I sold drugs, so I was in conversation with a lot of them, into their personal life. And a lot of them were like addicted to pain meds because of wounds that they end up getting over there overseas and being in the Army or the Marines and stuff like that. But they do everything from murder to rape. They're criminals. Like, if you look up, there's been times that we actually looked them up, and they look them on the streets and whatnot. We got cell phone stuff in there, and a lot of them even have DUIs. Any crime that you can have, they have it. You gotta think they're human. You know what I mean? But they come in with their holier than thou attitude, and a lot of them are criminals. I guess they're under the thought process of it take monsters to contain monsters, but they're the biggest monsters that create monsters. That's the type of things that's going on. In one situation, and this hurted me, I ended up going to Lucasville, got kicked out of a camp. I ended up stepping some guys up, got kicked out. I got kicked out of every camp I've been in. I had a dude that was like my little brother. His name was Steve Smith from Cincinnati. He ended up, I wasn't there, so, they ended up writing me and telling me, like, hey, Si's dead. And I thought niggas was joking, so I'm like, that's not something to play about, you know what I mean? Another dude that was like my brother, Jay Luke, also from Cincinnati, he confirmed it. And he told me that they ended up beating him back there and then hanging him up and making him look like he hung himself. That's the type of stuff that happens because they're criminals. But it's also the type of things that they get away with if we don't have family that fights for us. If we don't have family that's calling and going over their head and going over their head and going over their head. You know what I mean? Because they try and keep it contained within their camp. Within that fence, they try and keep it within there because then they can bury it. But if you get it outside that fence to Columbus, and then you get it beyond Columbus, because a lot of them, the prison system, they're all related. That's one thing that anybody who doesn't have any knowledge of not just the inmate system, how the inmates and all that ran, how the inmates survive, but the prison system as far as administration, you have to be knowledgeable of this. That's the only way you're gonna be able to protect your family, protect them and making sure that they get home, that they're taken care of and they're safe while they're in there, because these guys are criminals. A lot of them are bigger criminals than the guys that they were sworn to protect or sworn to oversee and stuff like that. Not protect, because that's the cops, and they're basically cops. They do the same thing. You know what I mean? But they're the biggest criminals, biggest gang. They'll pull up on you like they Bloods, Crips. A lot of them are Aryan Brotherhood, which is a white supremacist group. A lot of them are white supremacists. They implement their people and their views into society. You go all the way back to KKK and all of that. Those were people that were judges, doctors, police, sheriffs, and all this other stuff. White supremacists, they had the same views. So they were, knowledgeable enough to put judges, correctional officers, police officers, et cetera, into those positions, and that's how they win it. They're the biggest criminals.